What is one word that describes how you felt when you started writing?
I felt free.
Free.
There's a sense of clarity. There's a sense of wonder when you're writing a book. The best way I could describe it is like walking on clouds. If you can think of the most joyful of characters just running up into the sky.
Being an artist can be a heck of a ride, but you're not alone. On Journey of the Art, we tell inspiring stories of artists and chat with those who support us on this path. I'm your host, Lola Opatayo, writer, editor, singer, and all-round lover of words. Come with me on the journey. Hi, and welcome to Journey of the Art. Today we're talking about how immigrant kids can find friends in a new land and a sense of purpose through sports. My guest is Eddie Kawooya, author of the Ace and the Misfits series. Eddie's love for writing was inspired by his grandmother's oral stories and folklore of Uganda's ancestral past. His first book, Ace and the Misfits, was published in 2024, a fish out of water story of immigration and the pains and joys of integration in a new and sometimes frightening environment. A sequel novel to Ace and Misfits versus the Soccer Knights is inspired by his love for soccer and communal impact. And this is the first book that Eddie wrote, and today we're going to talk about the second one. Welcome to the show, Eddie.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's really great.
I'm glad to have you here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today because, as I was telling you before we started talking, your book brought back a lot of your books brought back a lot of childhood memories for me. The style of the telling of the story, even the camaraderie between the friends, brought back a lot of memories for me. And I'm just curious to know how you were able to tap into that. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, as am I.
Well, before we begin the conversation, if you don't know, you can find Journey of the Art wherever you get your podcasts. So check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms to listen on the go, follow the show, and leave a comment. This really helps to boost our visibility so more folks can discover us and join the community. Also, as always, I'd love to connect with you on Instagram, so please follow the show at Journey of the Art Pod. And today I have another ask of you, as always. If you love the show, please don't keep it to yourself. Tell someone about Journey of the Art. All right, Eddie. I know that one of the things I was also sharing with you before we started talking is the fact that this show is as much about the artist as it is about their art. And so I was wondering if you could start us off with a bit about your journey into your art as a writer.
Yeah. Again, thank you again for having me on the show.
You're welcome.
I think my journey as an artist started off at a very young age. We moved around a lot. My mom was a diplomat. So due to her work, we moved. One of my sisters and my younger brother moved with her. So we spent some time in Copenhagen, Denmark. Moved back to Uganda and then moved to Canada. One of the challenges of being one of those kids that moves around from country to country is that it's harder to find a place of home and a place where you situate yourself. Friends are very much like you create great bonds, but then you have to leave. So it's like almost so there's a ticker waiting as to when do I leave. But the one thing that always remained with me were stories. And I remember whenever I spent time with my grandmother being young, at a very young age, she would always share stories. And it was those stories that inspired me. When I was afraid of the dark, she would tell me a story of a myth of a hero overcoming the odds. If I was afraid of my insecurities of how I looked, because in some cases I was the only Black child in a classroom, it was those stories of overcoming, of resilience that really helped. But again, also when things weren't going as well at home, financially, what have you, It was the stories that I would like hide into, like the Secret Seven, the Famous Five, the Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, you name it, the Harry Potter books. Those were my friends. Those characters I could go on a journey with, I could disappear with. And I decided at the age of 8, I wanted to be a writer. So I would write small stories, and then I would get my brother, my younger brother, I'd bully him into saying, hey, read it and review it. Which one do you like? And then he would have to say, okay, if we do it, can we play together afterwards? So yeah,
Oh.
fine, I agree to play, but you have to read it, right? So it was that kind of, always tell me, okay, this was a good story, but I preferred this other story. What happened to this other character? So it was always a way in which you could frame a world, and connect with others. And because sometimes you go to places where people have never met a person, such as myself, or where I've come from, I would always want to create a story for them to understand who I am and how I connect with them and how their world also fascinates me. So it was a way of connecting, but also making sense of the world where I was growing up.
I love that. So, I love that you talked about your grandmother and how she told you stories.
Yeah.
At what point, because I know you did say that you, at the age of 8, you decided that you're going to be a writer.
Yeah.
But at what point in your, maybe your teenage years or adulthood, did you finally step out as a writer? Did you finally say to yourself, okay, now I feel like I'm a writer?
Oh man, that's a challenging one. I think I didn't get a sense of that in my part of it in my teenage life, but I think a lot of it in my undergrad life. So, to provide you with perspective, my father died when I was very young, at the age of 6. So, it was my mom, my 4 sisters, and my grandma that really helped. So, it was the women in my family that helped. My grandma was a matriarch of the family. So, it was through her teachings, and she was pulled out of primary school at a very young age because women weren't, I think girls at the time in Uganda weren't allowed to be in school. It was boys at her in her time. So she dedicated to making sure her kids and grandkids would go to school. So for her, the stories were the way in which her only way she could connect. And she wanted to hear our stories. And in high school, teenage life, I just moved to Canada when I was 13, in Ottawa specifically. And there was a sense of loss, of sense of self, of who I was, because I was in a completely new world, new place. I lost my friends. I had to start all over again. So writing was hard because I couldn't connect. Writing was easy in Uganda because I could connect with the land, I could connect with the people. I've spent enough time there, but in Canada, it was like, oh my God, this is a new terrain. Who would even listen to my stories? But it was the art, painting. I enjoy drawing. I enjoy poems and everything else. So I would do that in high school in class. And my teacher said, you really have a good penchant for this. You're always in the art room. You're always doing something artistic. And I always felt like, all right, maybe I'll be a comic book writer. And coming from an African family, that is very much like, yeah, as though you're writing your life away. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
So my mom told me, like, that's a plan B. What is a plan A? And it was I went into public affairs and policy management at Carleton, but it was there. That's actually where my sense of writing came. It was a summer after my first year. I just taken a course on developed and developing countries, and one of the visiting professors, was from, I think, Vietnam. And she really provided perspective on the politics, the dynamics, and how people lose, cultures are lost as a result of, say, colonialism and what have you. And it was there when I was just like, you know what? I was doing research on Uganda, on East Africa. And as I was doing the research, I was saying, like, would it be dope if I was writing a book, a fantasy book about East Africa with East African characters? So that's where it actually started in my first year of university. That's where it actually started again. And I kept going at it as well, but I never really followed through with it. I always tell people I wanted to write a book, but it was always one of those things where I don't really follow through until later on.
So then, because now we're sort of moving into the writing of the book.
Yeah.
What is one word that describes how you felt when you started writing?
I felt free.
Free.
Free. I sense there is. I enjoy freedom, just like almost everyone else, right? But there's a sense of clarity. There's a sense of wonder when you're writing a book. It's like the best way I could describe it is like walking on clouds. If you can think of the most joyful of characters just running up into the sky, with
It's such a beautiful picture.
with no care in the world, but smiling, but free, right? Their arms and legs are just out there, free, right? So that's how I feel deep down inside. Whenever I write, I feel free because I am allowing myself to just relax, to be in the moment, to be present with myself, but then also begin to imagine worlds, having conversations as well. What kind of characters can I really develop? And what, at the end of the day, what do I want to leave when I tell a story? I think
Right.
it always comes back to my grandma. My grandma always had something she would leave behind in a story, and you'd always wonder. You never understood it at a very young age, but now as I get older, I'm realizing, oh, now I understand what that story meant. And it was a story could have different meanings at different points in time. And I also like the Pixar movies because you can watch them at different ages that you're in, and then you realize, oh my God, I didn't realize this, but this actually makes sense. So I think that's the freedom of being able to write something connected, but have subtle meanings that anyone who reads it can also begin taking from it. But then allowing myself to just be my most unique and genuine self.
Right. Okay, so can you tell us about the book? And I'm talking about the second one now, Ace and the Misfits versus the Soccer Knights.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Ace and the Misfits versus the Soccer Knights takes place after a few months after the first Ace and the Misfits book, and it follows the journey of Ace now settled in Toronto, Canada, and now having his group of friends that he can hang out with. It starts off in a soccer match, a TFC soccer match, and Ace and the gang find out that one of the most phenomenal soccer stars in Canada, of course, is a fictional character, is present as well. And this is a player that Ace and his father, who had passed away, loved and adored. So this is a person who they're able to really like, Kadeem Chance, they're really able to really connect with. And he later on, before school starts, that Kadeem Chance is going to be coaching their grade 9, grade 10 teams, soccer teams. So the goal of this book here was to showcase the story of Ace and his friends trying to make the grade 9 soccer team now that they're in high school, and going through the trials and tribulations of ambition, trying to show up for your role model, but then also understanding what does it mean to be a team? What does it mean to be a friend? And what are the costs of always trying to win, right? So those were some of the juxtapositions, and also being part of a very immigrant community, showcasing the different types of people who also play soccer as well, right? So I know people talk about hockey, talk about baseball, but soccer is also a game that's played widely in Canada.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that. That was going to be one of my next few questions is I thought it was bold of you to have chosen that sport because in Canada, that's not one of the most popular sports. But in Africa, it's hugely popular. So I thought it was a way of paying homage to your African roots. And I think that was so nicely done. So how much of your immigrant experience were you able to draw from to write this book? Because I can see different parallels from reading about Ace from the first book and the second book, and even from your story, from your personal story.
I think a lot of it there's a lot that I draw on from my own immigrant story. There's also a lot that I draw on from the stories of my friends and a lot of my colleagues. We go back and forth as well. Like, hey, you remember what happened at this point? The funny thing is, I never made the soccer team. I tried out, but I never made the soccer team. And what I like to do with my stories is like I like to do a twist. It's like, no, he actually does it. He does makes it. What happens then? Um, but I think it was the nature of success. I think as an immigrant, success is a very important thing because you come to this country with almost nothing. You start from
Yeah.
ground zero. So you have to really show up. And it's either you're doing really well at sports or you just have to also do extremely well in the books, right? So it was showcasing that. But I think what I wanted to show with this story was that sometimes and I think we talked about this early on, sometimes there's a piece of us that's lost when we move into a completely new world, new place,
Yeah.
new community. And we don't lose it out of intention, but we do it out of survival. And because we do it out of survival, there are years that go by, and then you realize, oh man, I really wish I could do that, right?
Mm.
And you look at yourself and you wonder, what if I could? And for me was for any child that picks it up, whether immigrant or not, is that if you do have that passion, you really should like don't let it go. Really stick with it. If you're a parent, really, if the child says like, "Hey, I really want to follow through," see it through. Maybe they won't be the
Mm.
star, but at least they've done it. And I part of me, and I remember that took a long time. I talked to my brother about it. Was that I felt down because I couldn't make the soccer team, but it
Mm.
didn't mean I couldn't do other sports, right? So for me was having to write that and showcase that at least you can achieve those dreams, and with the right group of people they can actually really encourage you to do that. But also for my immigrant experience, I played soccer. My dad, before he passed away, managed a soccer club in Uganda, and that was a huge, I think I never got to hear his voice or meet him because he passed away when I was very young, but I wanted to also pay homage to that crucial element of soccer. It's like I couldn't hear him, but at least I wanted to have some kind of memento to him for the path that he had created for others during when he was alive.
Yeah. I love what you're saying to me about a group of people who help you to keep things going.
Mm,
Because if this book is about anything, it's about friendship,
yeah.
and how friends can, you know, help you in the hardest of times,
Mm,
help you in and through the hardest of times, right? And I think that that is such an important thing to touch on, especially for immigrant children.
mm,
As I'm also an immigrant, and as you and I know, there is a stripping of community that happens to you when you come into a new land.
yeah.
And I think we've read a lot about it when adults write about how they're feeling about it,
Mm,
the sense of loneliness, the sense of despair. But I don't know that there is as much spotlight on how children feel when they immigrate. I'm a mom,
yeah.
and I know how hard it was for my kids to not have the community that they had, and to now begin to look for a new community of friends.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about how important it is for immigrant children to find friends.
I think it's crucially important. I think friendship, always, as you mentioned, friendship can make or break you, but friendships really change the way you interact with the world. And having the right group of friends really goes beyond. As I mentioned, when I'm with friends, I feel like I'm part of a pirate crew sometimes because you never know, especially when I was young, you never know what kind of adventure you're going to go on. You just like, hey, where are we meeting? What are we up to today? It's like, I don't know, but I think it's going to be a fun day, right?
Yeah.
But I think it creates that sense of um, closeness that I can speak to someone and share something deeply because sometimes I would want to share with my mom, but I'm afraid of what she would take on it. So having that other group of people we can talk to, those people who can, maybe I was a shy kid growing up, but a lot of my friends are not that shy. They're very extroverted. So they let you provide a mirror to yourself and say like, hey, this is who you are. But maybe you could also be like, also you could gain something from it. We can learn from you and you can learn from us and stuff, right?
Right.
It's a two-way street, and they really help push you through, get a different sense. Now, sometimes as an immigrant, there's always a challenge of you're trying to, and I talk about this in the first book, you're always trying to show up in ways that are very different from you, right? It's a struggle because you want to seem as though that, hey, I'm just as cool. So you change your accent. You may do things out of the ordinary just to be seen as cool, just to say you can connect, right? Because you don't want to be seen as different or like as someone, as an other. But also there's a part of you that says like, hey, I just want to be myself. I just want to speak in my own tongue. I just want to like eat this lunch. I want to just talk about this show without feeling judged at all. And I think from immigrant kids, I think it's a matter of parents being able to say like, hey, really, I think for parents to be able to encourage themselves to say like, hey, if you really like this, that's really great. Like, what else are you doing? Like, which clubs are you visiting and everything else? This other person, do they like this other stuff? I think being encouraging interests in what their children are interested in, because then that helps them guide them into those other communities and groups that they would feel safest in. But then also for kids, I think it's great to find if there's something you love, irrespective if it was magic cards, if it was like anime or something of the sorts, if that's something that piques your interest, I don't think you should be shy away because you never know. Someone may low key like it, other person may dismiss it, but the friends who are going to be your friends are those who are going to be like, hey, that's really dope. Have you heard about this as well? Or even though they don't like it, they say like, hey, but we like hanging out with you. We like doing all these other things, right? So it's a give or take, but I found friendship to be the one safest place, one area in my life where I could be myself, and the group of people that allowed me to grow as a person.
Right. I mean, I love everything you're saying about the right kind of friends.
Yeah.
And I know that one of the challenges that immigrant children face is finding that right community of friends, right? And so I appreciate what you just said about allowing yourself to truly be yourself, because it's in your authenticity that you find your real friends, right? And that's what happens to Ace. He's able to be as imaginative and as energetic as he wants to be, because at some point he decides that, this is who I am, and that affinity for sports shines through, and it's what it really brings the friendships together. So I appreciate that. Earlier on, you talked about learning from your grandma and how her influence helped you to see a story in a different way and ask yourself, what did it leave me with? And I think that's so crucial. So I wanted to ask you, how much of your Ugandan storytelling traditions did you draw on to narrate the story? Because the other thing I noticed, as I shared with you earlier on, is that it brought back a lot of childhood memories for me.
Yeah. I think that's a great one. I think my grandmother always holds a special spot for me and for a lot of my siblings and the rest of my family. I think I drew in as much as I could. I think whenever she told a story, she would start it off with some kind of proverb, and she would end it with a proverb. But within that story was understanding the humanity of a person, because she always understood is that everyone has a good side and a bad side to them. but there is a humanity in everyone. Everyone
Right.
deserves a certain amount of dignity, right? But you must be able to understand exactly who are you dealing with, and what can you learn from them. And there's some people that, where redemption is so much possible, and then other people where it's not so much.
Right.
But for her, I think it was the storytelling was to understand, the human journey and the human path is never a straight line. It goes through meanders from here to there. It's never A
Right.
to Z. It can go from A to Y. And so therefore, the storytelling was more for you to understand that you may understand this is one person's story and this is how they land. But what did you learn from this chapter? What was the crucial part of this chapter? Now let me add another element to that. And then what have you learned? So that at every chapter, every stage, there's a story to be learned. And then it always reminds you back to, okay, what was it? What are we learning about ourselves as people?
Right.
What are we learning about the community that we're in? And what can we draw on? And the fact is that we don't have all the answers, but we're just trying to go as we are, making sense of it, through the people that we're with.
Right. I think what you've just shared is so empowering because one of the things that is constantly being heard is, especially when you're writing for kids, that you shouldn't write to teach them something.
Yeah.
And I say that this is empowering because the way that African stories are told, especially African folk tales, they are told to teach you something, and so when a writer is constantly hearing, don't teach kids something, an African writer that is constantly hearing, don't teach kids something, I wonder how, I feel like that's very easy for an African writer to depart from who they are and the storytelling traditions that they have.
Yeah.
So I think just hearing you saying is very empowering for anyone out there who is wanting to stay true to that African storytelling tradition of leaving the receiver of the story with something that they can go away with. Like, what did the story give to me? What did it, what has it done for you? What have you learned about yourself and the world? Right. I don't think that we tell African stories just for the sake of telling stories. And I know that this isn't specifically an African story, but it is by an African writer who has a lot of African influence.
Well, I would also credit the women in my life, my aunties, my sisters, and even the grannies. I think every time they tell a story, they tell it not as a way to, like, it's top down, but they tell it in such a way as in to say, like, when I was doing something a few years ago, this is what happened and stuff. And then they finish off, but this is what I learned, right? And they're trying to relate it back. Now it's for you, the person, to like take in and hear it. But
Right.
then maybe it's not hitting you immediately, but you go back, something else happens and you come back at, you know what? That story that you told, that was actually eye-opening because this just happened to me. But I think the way the women were really talking about it, I think when I sat down and actually listened to how, that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from. Is like listening to a lot of the elders, and around how are they communicating now, and that was a way in which I wanted to also weave the story.
Right. Okay, so what was the hardest part of this book to write?
The hardest part? Man. I think the hardest part is, I think it's always the soccer scenes. Those ones tend to be, because you have to really be creative about it. Because soccer anyone can say, like, it's just a soccer game, you're just kicking a ball around, but it has to be dynamic. But I think the hardest part was being able to vocalize what is Ace's challenge here, his ambition. writing about Ace's ambition and also not trying to portray the other team as bullies or anything else, because that was the first book. We had a bully in the first book.
Right.
But in this one, these were just opposing teams. These were just other people on the other side, right? So how do you write them in a way in which they're not depicted as like villains, but they're just antagonists? And they're antagonists because they just happen to be like they're challenging each other for just spots on a team as well, right?
Right.
And how do you bring that all together in the end so that it doesn't feel so contrived, it doesn't feel forced, but it feels natural. It feels, and also making it feel as though, I think the hardest part is who within the Misfits doesn't get on the soccer team. And I think that also has a story to tell about, you're with your friends, you're all vying for the same thing, but not everyone is going to get the same like prize. And I remember even from my own time, I didn't get into a lot of the master's programs I wanted to. I didn't get into a lot of competitions. My friends did. They made the basketball team. They made the soccer team. They made those achievements, but it didn't mean I was less than for not being able to make it. It just so happened I didn't make it. But it didn't affect my friendship. And I think that's where, again, with friendship, we celebrate each other for the wins. We're there for each other for the losses. And we come together. And also the friendship is not a group that just stays stagnant. It grows. Right. And I think that was also the other part. I wanted to show growth, organic growth within this friendship group. Because just in any African society, as you get older, your friendship groups grow. Very different from Western culture, but then your friendships do grow over time. So I wanted to embed that aspect as well. Like Ace is going into a new grade, which means he's going to meet new people, and that means that's going to diversify his friendship circles.
Right. And one of the things that I also love about this book, and I want to say this before we move on, is the fact that this is a book that really tells us the challenges that boys go through.
Yeah.
Because this thing you're talking about not making the team, is a very real problem for boys. Yeah. And I have a son, and so that's why I understand how frustrating it is. And I remember all the times that I've had to say to him, I know you didn't make the team, but you made that one. You didn't make this team, but you made that team. And it doesn't define who you are. And I think these are very crucial moments in a boy's life, because it can be the moment that he defines himself, based on one opportunity that wasn't so important after all, or that isn't so important after all. So I really want to thank you for shining a light on that aspect of being a boy, of male struggles, especially here in North America, and as an immigrant kid, right? So I want to talk a bit about the language that you chose to use. I know you have words like aura, which is very Gen Alpha in the book. And I think that I found that very much in the first book. Yeah. How do you write in the language of today's kids?
TikTok.
That's a very good resource.
Where else are you saying? What are they saying these days as well? Like,
oh, yeah.
I think I try to stay as grounded as possible. So outside of writing, I also have a corporate job. And I think at my corporate job, during the summers, we have summer students come in. So sometimes I'll like sit with them over lunch and just say like, so, what are the kids saying these days and stuff? Like, so if I was to write this, how would you phrase it, right? What would they phrase and stuff? So they would help me as well. So I give credit to them. But I try to I read different articles. You'd watch the TikTok, you watch the YouTube channels and everything else. You try to get in the buzz. Of course, I will never be in the mindset of today's teenager. No, I try to do the best as I can. And also even during the editing processes, they say this sounds like too much of an adult. It's like, okay, let me roll it back as well. And sometimes you're walking, you're on a streetcar or something of sorts, and you hear a conversation. Right. And you just, like a writer's mind, you just can't help yourself. you're just like, okay, let me listen in closely because this is
Right.
one shot. So you're hearing, and then you get out your phone and you quickly type. Okay, how did they?
All right.
You can't say, "Excuse me, can you stop record? Speak here, please." Right? So it's like, let me just like note down. But that's the best that I can do, just to like make it sound as a teenager.
Yeah. I think a writer's life is a lot about observation and eavesdropping.
Yeah.
There are many times that I've, passed by someone and they'd said something and I've just noted it somewhere in my brain. I usually lose a lot of it because I don't write it down. But I find it very fascinating listening to people, and especially people who are not within my immediate circle, right? People from a different culture, or people who have different interests than I do. So I think that's a good tip. So, Eddie, what would you say to an African writer in the diaspora who wants to reach African children with more diverse stories?
What would I say?
Like, if you could give one piece of advice, just one piece of advice, what would that be?
Oh yeah. So this was advice I got from my first editor, and I think write the stories that feel natural to you, that feel true to you. I'm from Uganda, so I enjoy writing about Ugandan folklore, fantasy, what have you. That's how I got here. That's how I actually got here. And it led to writing Ace and the Misfits. Is not a fantasy, but of course, my goal is to have a fantasy genre that is influenced by Ugandan fantasy, because not a lot of people have read about it or know about it as well. So then add that spice to life. But as an African writer, write feels right to you. Write what connects you to where you're from, and write from the heart. I think in Uganda, you speak from the heart, and that's when people know that you're being true, you're acting with intention. And I think when you write from the heart, whatever story it may be it fantasy, non-fantasy, whatever, that's what resonates with people. And I would also add on is like, you don't give up. Really ask a friend. I think what got me here was I asked a friend, and that friend connected me with someone, and that friend then connected me with someone else, and then that had its own domino effect. But I think it's important for African writers to really go out to your networks, really reach out to people and just say like, hey, I read your book, really great. Ace and Misfits 1 or 2, recommend those ones. But I read your book. I listened to this podcast. I would like to get some tips. And I think those people would really help. Some people are going to be very helpful, some not so much. But at the end of the day, if it's a dream, no one has the power to put your dream down other than yourself. So therefore, if it's your dream and you think of it, you dream of it, really follow through, because that's, I find, the ancestral voice telling you there's someone who needs to hear your story.
Right. That's such a beautiful advice that I will take myself. So at the beginning of the show, I asked you to summarize the beginning of your artistic journey.
Yeah.
And so now I want to ask you that we've come to the end. What's one word that describes how you feel about your writing now?
One word that describes my writing now?
Like one word that describes how you feel.
How I feel
about your writing now.
Elevated. I find it's elevated from where I started. Back now, having this conversation with you, I find that it's elevated in so many ways. And it's elevated based on the opportunities that have come my way, but how open I have been to like lots of feedback, and also being able to put myself out there. And because I made those steps, it has really grown in ways I never expected it to, and being allowed to be mentored by other people. So I feel it is both freeing and elevated, because now whenever I write my book, the books that come after these two books as well are going to be at levels very different than the first Ace and the Misfits book, right? They would be far more grounded, far more um, the storytelling would be on a whole other scale. So I think for me as a person who I love growth and I love being able to go back and say, this is where I came from. My God, this is where I am. And just as a real dynamic character in a great book, I want to have that kind of journey to say like, wow, he's on a max level or
Right.
or 100%. Let's go. So that is always my feeling when I write now is like, how can I grow this talent to something more?
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's so fitting. If at the beginning you felt free and now you feel elevated, that's a lot of progress.
Yeah.
Ace and the Misfits is the first book. That word is such a tongue twister. Misfits. Say that 20 times. I've stumbled over that word several times today. But anyway, this is the first book, and then the second one is Ace and the Misfits versus the Sucker Knights.
Yes. Versus.
Right. So I wish you the very best with the rest of the of your writing.
Thank you for having me here.
On the next episode, I'll be chatting with another inspiring artist. But before then, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me what you think about this show and this episode. Feel free to drop me a note here or send me a DM on Instagram at Journey of the Art Pod. Finally, please subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or follow and rate the show if you're listening elsewhere. Help me connect with other artists who need a dose of inspiration today. Until next time, stay on the journey of your art.